The sun rose slowly over London, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. Inside Windsor Castle, the old clock struck 6 times. In the East Wing, William Windsor opened his eyes. Today was the day he would become king. He turned to look at Catherine, still sleeping beside him. Her face was peaceful, her breathing deep and even. William smiled. For 20 years she had stood by his side. Through good times and bad times, through the deaths of his grandmother and father, through the birth of their 3 beautiful children. And now she would stand with him as queen. "I couldn't do this without you," he whispered, not wanting to wake her yet. William slipped out of bed and walked to the window. He pulled back the heavy curtains and looked out at the gardens below. Workers were already busy, setting up security checkpoints. In a few hours, thousands of people would line the streets of London to see their new king. The weight of responsibility pressed down on William's shoulders. Not just the crown, but the future of a family that had ruled for generations. He thought of his father, gone only 6 months, and his grandmother, the queen who had served for 70 years. William hoped he could make them proud. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. "Come in," he called quietly. The door opened, and William's heart lifted. Charlotte, his 8-year-old daughter, peeked in. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Daddy, are you awake?" she whispered. "Can I come in?" William nodded, smiling. Charlotte ran to him, her nightgown flowing behind her. He lifted her up, surprised at how big she was getting. "Are you ready to be king today?" she asked, her small hands on his cheeks. "I think so," William answered honestly. "Are you ready to be a princess at my coronation?" Charlotte nodded seriously. "George and Louis and I have been practicing our walks, and our bows, and our waves." She demonstrated a perfect royal wave, making William laugh. The door opened again. This time it was Harry, William's brother, looking tired but happy. "Sorry to come by so early," Harry said. "The kids are jet-lagged and wanted to see their cousins." William motioned him in. "It's good to see you, brother." Harry crossed the room and embraced William. The brothers held each other tightly. It had been a long road back to this moment. Years of distance and hurt, slowly healed by time and love. "I wouldn't miss this day," Harry said, stepping back. "Father would be so proud." "And Mother," William added softly. The brothers shared a sad smile, thinking of Diana, who had never lived to see her sons become men. Catherine stirred in the bed, finally waking. She sat up, surprised to see her room already filled with family. "Is this a private party, or can anyone join?" she asked with a smile. Charlotte ran to her mother, jumping onto the bed. "Mummy, today you will be queen." Soon, George and Louis burst into the room too, followed by Harry's children. The royal bedroom filled with laughter and excited chatter. Servants bringing the morning teas stood in the doorway, smiling at the happy scene. William looked around at his family, his wife, his children, his brother. In a few hours, the world would see him crowned as king. But in this moment, he was simply a man surrounded by love. Outside, the bells of London began to ring, calling the city to wake. The coronation day had begun. For the Windsor family, it would be a day unlike any other. A day when they would show the world that they were not just royalty. They were a family in love. The royal dressing rooms bustled with activity. Servants moved quickly, carrying heavy robes, polished shoes, and sparkling jewels. In the center of it all stood William, arms outstretched as 4 attendants dressed him in the traditional coronation garments. "These robes weigh more than George did as a baby," William joked, trying to ease his nerves. The robes were rich purple, lined with white fur and decorated with gold thread. They had been worn by kings for hundreds of years. As the attendants worked, William's mind drifted to his father and grandmother. How strange it felt to stand where they once stood. In another room, Catherine was also being prepared. Her dress was white and gold, made by the best designers in Britain. As women fixed her hair and makeup, Catherine watched her reflection in the mirror. Today, she would become queen. Not just the wife of a king, but a queen in her own right. "Your Highness, it's time for the jewels," said an older woman holding a red box. Catherine nodded. The woman opened the box to reveal a diamond necklace that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth. Catherine touched it gently. "She wanted you to wear it today," the woman said softly. Tears filled Catherine's eyes, but she blinked them away. Today was not a day for crying. Down the hall, the royal children were also getting ready. Charlotte twirled in her white dress, watching the skirt float around her. "Do I look like a proper princess?" she asked her nanny. "The most proper princess in all of England," the nanny replied with a smile. George, now 10 years old, stood tall in his small uniform. He looked so much like his father that it made the staff whisper. Louis, the youngest at 6, struggled with his formal clothes. "I don't like this collar," he complained. "It's too tight." "Just for today," George told his brother. "For father." In a guest room, Harry helped his children dress. His son Archie, now 7, wore a suit that matched his father's. "Will Uncle William really let us be in the ceremony?" Archie asked. "Even though we live in America now?" "Of course," Harry answered. "We're still family." "That's what today is all about." Harry's wife entered the room, beautiful in a simple blue dress. She adjusted Harry's tie and kissed him softly. "Ready to see your brother become king?" she asked. Harry nodded. "It's strange. We always knew this day would come, but it still feels unreal." Outside the palace, London had transformed. Flags hung from every building. Flowers lined the streets. People had camped overnight to get good spots along the route. They wore red, white, and blue and carried pictures of William and Catherine. An old man told stories to children about seeing Queen Elizabeth's coronation 70 years ago. Young couples took selfies with the palace in the background. A group of women wore tiaras and waved small Union Jack flags. Back inside the palace, William took a moment alone. He stood before a portrait of his father, looking up at the painted face. "I hope I can be the king you taught me to be," he whispered. A small hand slipped into his. William looked down to see George standing beside him. "Grandfather would be proud," the boy said simply. William squeezed his son's hand. Then, from another room, came the sound of trumpets. The first signal. It was almost time. The family gathered in the grand hall. William and Catherine, Charlotte, George, and Louis, Harry and his family, cousins, aunts, and uncles, all dressed in their finest clothes, all ready to show the world what the Windsor family truly was. A servant approached and bowed. "Your Majesty, the carriages are ready." William took a deep breath and looked at his family, his strength, his joy, his reason for being more than just a king. "Then let us begin," he said. The royal carriages waited outside Buckingham Palace. They shone in the morning sun, their gold details sparkling. 8 white horses stood ready for each carriage, wearing red and gold harnesses. William and Catherine stepped outside to loud cheers from the crowd. They waved, smiling at the thousands of people who had come to see them. William helped Catherine into the first carriage, then climbed in beside her. "Look at all the people," Catherine said softly. "They've come from all over the world." William nodded. "They're not just here for us. They're here for what we stand for." The children rode in the second carriage with Harry and his family. Charlotte sat tall, waving just like her mother had taught her. George looked serious, trying to act grown-up. Louis bounced in his seat, pointing at everything he saw. "Remember what we planned," Charlotte whispered to her brothers when no one was listening. George nodded. "Father will be so surprised." Louis clapped his hands. "It will be the best coronation ever." Harry smiled, watching his niece and nephews whisper together. "What are you 3 plotting?" he asked with a laugh. "It's a secret, Uncle Harry," Charlotte said with a smile that looked just like Diana's. "You'll see at the Abbey." The carriages began to move. Soldiers on horseback rode in front and behind them. The procession moved slowly through the streets of London. People cheered and waved flags. Some threw flowers. Others took pictures with their phones. An old woman cried as William passed. "I remember his mother's wedding day," she told the person next to her. "Now her boy is becoming king." The royal family smiled and waved, but inside the carriages, they were thinking of what was to come. William touched the ring on his finger, his mother's ring that he had given to Catherine when he asked her to marry him. It made him feel that Diana was with them today. "Are you nervous?" Catherine asked quietly. "A little," William admitted. "Not about being king, but about today, about doing everything right." Catherine took his hand. "You will be perfect. Just be yourself. That's what the people love about you." In the second carriage, the royal children were getting excited. Through the windows, they could see Westminster Abbey getting closer, the huge church where kings and queens have been crowned for almost 1,000 years. "Will we really sit on those big chairs?" Louis asked, eyes wide. "Only mother and father sit on thrones," George explained. "We sit on special seats nearby." "But we're still very important," Charlotte added. "We're the future of the family." Harry watched his niece and nephews with pride. They were so young, but they already understood their place in history. His own children looked out the windows with wonder, not used to such grand events. "Uncle William will wear a big crown," Harry's son Archie said. "Will it be heavy?" "Very heavy," Harry answered. "That's why kings must be strong, not just in their bodies, but in their hearts." The carriages approached Westminster Abbey. Thousands more people lined the streets here. Bells rang out from the church towers. Guards stood at attention, their uniforms bright red against the ancient gray stone. Inside the first carriage, William took a deep breath. In just an hour, he would be King William V of the United Kingdom, the 42nd monarch since William the Conqueror. But more importantly, he would still be a husband to Catherine, a father to his children, and a brother to Harry. The carriages stopped at the great doors of the Abbey. Footmen rushed to open the doors. The moment had come. "Ready?" William asked Catherine. She squeezed his hand. "Together," she said. "Always together." Westminster Abbey stood tall and grand, just as it had for over 900 years. Inside, 3,000 guests waited, kings and queens from other countries, presidents and prime ministers, famous people from all over the world. They all wore their best clothes and talked quietly as they waited. The Abbey looked magical. Flowers covered every corner. Candles lit the ancient walls. Golden decorations shone in the light that came through the stained glass windows. The smell of incense filled the air. At the front of the Abbey stood 2 thrones, one for William and one for Catherine. Behind them were smaller seats for the royal children. Everything was ready for the most important royal event in many years. The Archbishop of Canterbury, an old man with kind eyes, checked his watch. It was time. He nodded to the choir master. The music started, a beautiful song that filled the huge church. Outside, William stepped from the carriage and helped Catherine down. Her white dress sparkled with diamonds. William wore his military uniform under the royal robes. They looked at the great doors of the Abbey and took a deep breath together. As tradition required, the king would enter last. Catherine would go first with the younger children. Then other members of the royal family would follow. Finally, William would walk in alone. "See you inside," Catherine said, squeezing William's hand before letting go. Harry approached his brother while Catherine gathered the children. "Ready for the biggest moment of your life?" he asked with a smile. "Having children was the biggest moment of my life," William answered honestly. "This is just a job." Harry laughed and clapped his brother on the shoulder. "That's why you'll be a great king." Inside the Abbey, the music changed. The guests stood up. The great doors opened, and the procession began. First came royal cousins and distant relatives. Then Harry's family entered, walking slowly and carefully as they had practiced. Harry's wife smiled at the crowd looking beautiful and confident despite all the difficult years. Next came Catherine with Charlotte, George, and Louis. The crowd gasped at how lovely they looked. Catherine wore Queen Elizabeth's crown that had been made smaller for her. She walked with perfect grace, holding Louis's hand. George walked tall beside them. But something was different. Charlotte wasn't following the plan. Instead of walking behind her mother as practiced, she stepped to Catherine's other side and took her hand. Then she reached back and took George's hand. George, surprised but understanding quickly, took Louis's free hand. Now the four of them were linked together, walking as one family unit. Whispers spread through the abbey. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Royal ceremonies followed strict rules. But no one could deny how beautiful it looked, a mother and her children showing their love openly before the world. In the waiting area, William watched on a small screen. Tears filled his eyes at what his family was doing. They were changing centuries of tradition to show what really mattered. The Archbishop looked surprised, but then smiled warmly. He understood what this modern royal family was saying. They were people first, royals second. As Catherine and the children reached the front of the abbey, they stopped and turned. Now all eyes looked to the great doors again. It was time for William to enter. The trumpets sounded, a bright golden noise that made everyone's heart beat faster. The doors opened wide. William stood alone, the weight of history on his shoulders. The purple robe, the heavy crown waiting to be placed on his head. Centuries of kings and queens before him. It was a lot for one man to carry. Then William looked up and saw his family waiting for him. Catherine and their three beautiful children. Harry and his family. All the people he loved most in the world. Suddenly, he knew exactly what to do. William stood at the doorway of Westminster Abbey. The music played loudly. 3,000 people watched him. This was the moment when he would walk alone to the throne. Kings had done it this way for hundreds of years. But William was not just a king today. He was a father and a husband too. He took 5 steps into the abbey. The crowd watched in silence. Then William did something no one expected. He stopped walking. He turned to a royal helper nearby and whispered something. The man looked surprised but nodded quickly. He hurried away while William stood still in the middle of the aisle. The music played on, but people began to whisper. What was happening? Why had the king stopped? Even the Archbishop at the front looked confused. Catherine, standing at the front with the children, watched with wide eyes. This was not part of the plan. She leaned down to Charlotte. "What is your father doing?" she whispered. Charlotte smiled. "I think he had the same idea we did, Mummy." The helper returned to William's side. Behind him came Harry and his family, who had already taken their seats. They looked confused, but followed the helper back to where William stood. William smiled at his brother. "I'm not doing this alone," he said quietly. Harry's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, understanding without more words. Then William looked to the front of the abbey. He raised his hand and motioned to Catherine and the children. The crowd gasped. This had never happened before. The coronation ceremony was one of the most traditional events in the world. Every step was planned and had been done the same way for centuries. But Catherine understood immediately. She took Charlotte's hand, who took George's hand, who held Louis's hand. Together, they walked back down the aisle to join William. "What are you doing?" Catherine asked when they reached him, though she was smiling. "Being a father and husband first, king second," William replied. He turned to the crowd and spoke in a clear voice that reached every corner of the abbey. "Today marks a new chapter for our family and for our nation. I stand before you not just as your king, but as a man blessed with the love of his family. And it is with my family that I wish to begin this journey." William took Catherine's hand. Harry stood on his other side. The children gathered around them. For a moment, the abbey was completely silent. Then, from the back, someone began to clap. Another person joined in. Soon, the whole abbey filled with applause. People stood up, cheering for the royal family. Even the old archbishop was smiling widely now. He had seen many ceremonies, but never one like this. William looked at Catherine, ready to break a few more rules today. "Lead the way, Your Majesty," she replied with a loving smile. Together, the Windsor family walked down the aisle. William and Catherine in front, hand in hand. The children following behind, also holding hands. Harry and his family walking beside them. They reached the front of the abbey where the thrones waited. As tradition required, William should sit alone first. Then Catherine would join him. The children would sit separately. But William had other ideas. He lifted young Louis into his arms. The little boy giggled, not understanding the history his father was making. William sat on his throne with his youngest son on his lap. Catherine sat on her throne with Charlotte beside her. George stood tall between his parents' thrones, a prince learning what it meant to put family first. The archbishop approached with the crown. It was ancient and heavy with jewels. He looked at William, silently asking if he should continue with the ceremony. William nodded. "We're ready," he said. "All of us together." The archbishop lifted the ancient crown high so everyone could see it. The St. Edward's crown was over 300 years old. It shone with jewels and gold. It was very heavy, over 5 pounds of metal and stones. "Are you willing to take the oath?" the archbishop asked William. "I am willing," William replied clearly. The archbishop began to speak the old words that had been used for hundreds of years. William repeated them, promising to serve the people, to be fair and kind, to protect the country. As William spoke, he kept one arm around Louis, who sat quietly on his lap. The little boy stared at the crown with big eyes. "Is that going on your head, Daddy?" Louis whispered. "Yes," William whispered back, "but only for a little while." Catherine smiled at them. Charlotte sat close to her mother, watching everything carefully. George stood tall and straight, taking mental notes of everything. One day, many years from now, this would be his ceremony. The archbishop finished the prayers and lifted the crown again. This was the most important moment. When the crown touched William's head, he would officially become king. "With this crown," the archbishop said, "I crown you William V, by the grace of God, King of the United Kingdom, and the other realms and territories." Slowly, he lowered the crown onto William's head. William closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his father and grandmother. He thought of his mother who never lived to see this day. The crown was indeed very heavy, but William felt strong enough to carry it because he was not alone. "Long live the king," the archbishop called out. "Long live the king." The crowd replied, their voices filling the abbey. Louis clapped his small hands. "Long live Daddy," he added, making everyone smile. Next came Catherine's crowning. She knelt before the archbishop. A smaller crown waited for her, one that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth. William did something unexpected again. He stood up, carefully setting Louis on the throne, and walked to Catherine's side. He took her hand as she knelt. "We do this together," he said. His voice was picked up by the microphones and broadcast to millions watching around the world. The archbishop placed the crown on Catherine's head. William helped her to stand. "I present to you Her Majesty Queen Catherine," the archbishop announced. The crowd cheered again. William and Catherine turned to face their people, hand in hand. Charlotte ran to them, followed by George. Louis jumped down from the throne and joined his siblings. The Windsor family stood together before the world, crowns on their heads, but love in their hearts. In his seat, Harry watched with pride and a bit of sadness. He remembered standing at his brother's side at so many important moments. Their mother's funeral, their years at school, William's wedding. William caught his brother's eye and motioned for him to join them. Harry hesitated, then stood and walked to his brother's side. William put his arm around Harry's shoulders. "The crown may be on my head," William said quietly, "but our family remains our true strength." Photographers captured the moment. The new king and queen with their children, and the king's brother at his side. It was a picture of love and unity that would be remembered for years to come. Outside the abbey, the news spread quickly. People watching on screens in parks and squares cheered and cried. This was not just a coronation of a king. It was the celebration of a family. The bells of London rang out joyfully. The ceremony continued with more prayers and songs, but the most important part had already happened. The Windsors had shown the world that they were more than royalty. They were a family that loved each other above all else. After the crowning, the ceremony continued with more traditions. William held the royal scepter and orb, symbols of power that kings had held for centuries. But he did it his own way, sitting with his family close beside him, not standing alone as kings before him had done. The choir sang beautiful songs that filled the abbey with sound. The music seemed to touch everyone's hearts. Even little Louis, who had been getting tired, sat up straight to listen. Then came the moment for the royal family to receive the blessings of the people. One by one, important leaders from all parts of the United Kingdom came forward to bow before the new king and queen. The Prime Minister came first, kneeling before William and Catherine. "Your Majesties," she said, "on behalf of your government, I pledge our loyalty." William nodded, but then did something unexpected again. He stood up and helped the Prime Minister to her feet. "We stand together to serve the people," he said. "No one needs to kneel before another in service of our nation." Whispers spread through the abbey. This was another break with tradition, but one that showed what kind of king William would be, humble and focused on equality. As more leaders came forward, William greeted each the same way. Catherine followed his example. The children watched and learned what it meant to be both royal and humble. In the crowd, people began to understand that this day was truly historic. Not just because a new king was crowned, but because the monarchy itself was changing before their eyes. An old duke leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Queen Elizabeth would be proud. The boy has her sense of duty, but his mother's heart." Meanwhile, Charlotte had been waiting for a special moment. She whispered to George, and he nodded. The two children had planned something secret with their royal cousins. When there was a pause in the ceremony, Charlotte stood up from her seat. She walked to the middle of the abbey where everyone could see her. George followed with Louis. Harry's children joined them too. The adults looked confused. This was not part of the plan. But William and Catherine trusted their children and watched with curious smiles. Charlotte, only 8 years old but very brave, spoke in a clear voice that carried through the big church. "My great-grandmother once said that the crown is not just jewels, but service and duty," she said, remembering the words her father had taught her. "Today we promise to help our father and mother serve you all, not just as princes and princesses, but as children who love their country." The royal children then did something beautiful. Each of them had been given a small flower to wear. They removed these flowers and laid them at the foot of the throne. It was their own way of showing they were ready to serve. There wasn't a dry eye in the abbey. Even tough soldiers with serious faces wiped away tears. This wasn't in any script or plan. It came from the hearts of the children themselves. William stood and walked to his daughter. He knelt down to her level, not caring that a king was not supposed to kneel before anyone. "Thank you, Charlotte," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You remind us what is truly important." He gathered all the children in his arms. Catherine joined them, careful of her crown but not caring about her fancy dress getting wrinkled. The Archbishop watched with a warm smile. In his many years, he had seen many royal events, but never had he seen one with so much genuine love. Outside the abbey, the crowds watching on big screens cheered loudly. This royal family was different. They were real. They were showing that love and family came before rules and traditions. The ceremony continued, but something had changed. The coronation had become more than a royal event. It had become a family promise to the nation. The coronation ceremony was coming to an end. The final prayers were said. The choir sang one last beautiful song. Then the organ played loud, happy music as William and Catherine prepared to leave Westminster Abbey as king and queen. By tradition, they should walk out in a certain order. The king first, then the queen, then the rest of the family. But William had other ideas. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked Catherine with a smile. "With you?" "Always," she replied. William looked at his children. "Shall we show everyone how the Windsor family leaves an abbey?" The children nodded excitedly. Louis, who was getting tired after the long ceremony, reached up his arms to be carried. William lifted him up without hesitation, not caring that kings weren't supposed to carry children while wearing their crowns and robes. "Harry," William called to his brother, "you and your family come with us too." The Archbishop looked concerned. "Your Majesty, the traditional exit has been planned for. Today we make a new tradition," William said kindly but firmly. "One where family walks together." The Archbishop thought for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "As you wish, Your Majesty." The organ music changed to a more joyful tune. The great doors of Westminster Abbey opened. Outside, thousands of people waited to see their new king and queen. William took Catherine's hand. Charlotte held her mother's other hand. George walked beside them. Harry and his family joined them, making one big group. Together, the Windsor family walked down the long aisle. The guests stood and cheered. Many had tears in their eyes. This was a moment that would be remembered for generations. They reached the doors and paused. The sunshine was bright after the darkness of the abbey. The sounds of the crowd outside were loud, cheering, clapping, and bells ringing from churches all across London. "Ready to greet your people?" William asked his family. "Our people," Catherine corrected with a smile. They stepped outside. The cheers grew even louder. People waved flags and threw flowers. Cameras flashed. The world was watching this moment. Usually, the royal family would separate into different carriages for the ride back to Buckingham Palace, the king and queen in one, the children in another, other family members in others. But when the royal helpers brought the carriages around, William shook his head. "We'll all ride in the first carriage," he said. The helper looked surprised. "Your Majesty, it might be a tight fit with all of you." "Then we'll sit close," William replied. "That's what families do." The large golden carriage was brought forward. William helped Catherine in first, careful of her long dress and crown. Then the children climbed in, excited to ride with their parents. There was just enough room for Harry and his wife too. William was the last to get in. Before he did, he turned to face the crowds. He removed his heavy crown for a moment and held it up for everyone to see. Then, in a move that shocked many, he bowed to the people, something kings never did. "Thank you for your love and support," he called out. "We will serve you with all our hearts." The crowd roared with approval. This was a new kind of king, a king who understood that true leadership came with humility. William put his crown back on and climbed into the carriage. It was indeed a tight fit with everyone inside, but no one minded. Louis sat on his father's lap. Charlotte leaned against her mother. George sat tall between his parents. The horses began to move. The carriage rolled forward, beginning the journey back to Buckingham Palace. As they rode through the streets of London, people noticed something special. The royal family wasn't sitting stiff and formal. They were talking, laughing, and pointing out things they saw in the crowd. They looked happy. "Look," people said to each other. "They're just like us, a family who loves each other." And that was exactly what William and Catherine wanted the world to see. The golden carriage arrived at Buckingham Palace. The guards stood at attention. The red carpet was rolled out. Everything was ready for the return of the new king and queen. The palace looked beautiful with flags flying and flowers everywhere. Thousands of people filled the plaza in front, waiting to see the royal family one more time on this special day. As the carriage stopped, royal helpers rushed forward to open the door. They expected to help the king out first, then the Queen, as tradition required. But William had already helped Catherine step down, with the children following. The family stood together at the bottom of the palace steps. Louis was getting very tired after the long day. He rubbed his eyes and leaned against his father's leg. William smiled and picked up his son again. Catherine adjusted her crown, which had become slightly crooked during the carriage ride. "You look beautiful," William told her softly. "The most beautiful Queen England has ever had." "Even with a crooked crown?" she asked with a smile. "Especially with a crooked crown," he answered. The crowd was calling for the royal family. It was time for the traditional appearance on the palace balcony. This was the moment when the new king and queen would wave to their people. The family walked up the steps and into the palace. They moved through grand rooms with paintings of kings and queens from the past. William thought about all the royals who had walked this path before him. His father, his grandmother, his ancestors going back hundreds of years. But none of them had done it quite like this, with children in their arms and family by their side every step of the way. They reached the room behind the famous balcony. Royal helpers were waiting to make sure everything was perfect for the appearance. "Your Majesty," one helper said to William. Traditionally, the king and queen appear first, and then the children join a few minutes later. William looked at his family. They had been together through every part of this day. He didn't want to separate now. "Today," he said, "we go out together." The helper nodded with a smile. "Of course, Your Majesty." The glass doors to the balcony opened. The sounds of the crowd grew louder. William and Catherine stepped out, with Charlotte, George, and Louis beside them. Harry and his family stood just behind them. The people below cheered and waved. The noise was amazing. Louis covered his ears, but he was smiling. Charlotte and George waved to the crowd just like they had practiced. Catherine looked at William. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about tomorrow," he answered, "and all the days after. About the kind of king I want to be. The kind of father. The kind of husband." "And what have you decided?" she asked. "That they're all the same thing," he said. "Being a good man. Being there for the people I love. Being open and honest and kind." Catherine took his hand. "I think you're already doing a wonderful job." The family waved to the crowds below. Airplanes flew overhead, leaving trails of red, white, and blue smoke. Bells rang across the city. William looked at his beautiful family, at Catherine, his partner for over 20 years, at their children, the future of the monarchy, at Harry, the brother he had almost lost, but found again. This was not how kings of the past had ruled, but this was his way. The Windsor way. Family first, always. As the sun began to set on London, casting a golden light over the palace, William knew this was just the beginning. The crown was heavy, but love made it lighter. The job ahead was big, but family made it possible. The Windsor family stood together, waving to their people, not just as royalty, but as a family in love. And that, more than any crown or throne, was their true strength and legacy.